to our Tech Talk for Nonprofits webinar. My name is Sarah Sanford. I am the Director of Operations for NCW Tech Alliance. I just want to share a little bit about our partnership for our Tech Talk webinars with MPI, the Nonprofit Practices Institute. So Jennifer Dolge is Marketing and Communications Director, and she just wanted to share that they've got some incredible events and resources coming up, so you can head to their website to learn more. And without further ado, I would love to advance to the next slide so I can introduce you to our guest speakers today. Perfect. Colleen and Dr. Sue Kane. I'm going to pass it on to you to do some brief introductions before we head and dive into today's topic.
Well, we didn't talk about who was going to go first on this, so I'll start and introduce myself. I'm Sue Kane, and I have the honor of working alongside Sarah at NCW Tech Alliance to connect people and technology throughout North Central Washington, and have an opportunity to tell you a little bit about time tracking tools that we're using as part of the technology behind the scenes at NCW Tech Alliance.
Thank you. And I'm Colleen Malmassari. I am the founder of Back 40 Advisors, an HR consulting practice dedicated to helping organizations optimize their people strategies and back office operations. We're nearing our first year in existence, which is exciting. Prior to that, though, I've taken many different steps in getting to this place of my career. The start of my career, I was a financial accountant in the Yakima Valley. And a few years into my career, I realized that I wasn't passionate for financial math, as that balanced at the end of every day, and was more passionate for human math that never balances. So my dual experience in accounting and 15 years of HR leadership allows me to approach organizational challenges in a different way, maybe more holistic, and being able to understand both the human capital and financial impacts of those strategic decisions. So many thanks to North Central Washington Tech Alliance and MPI for inviting me to join this conversation today. I'm really excited to join. Thank you.
I'll give a little bit of backstory on how today's presentation came about, because like many of you who are on listening today, NCW Tech Alliance had questions at the start of the year about the new labor laws and how that affected us and what we needed to be doing to make sure that we were compliant with some of the new wage and labor laws. And our first call was Colleen, all things HR. We are experts in our communities and how we're serving them, and we are not experts in human resources and in compliance and regulation. And so I can't even tell you how much of a relief it has been to have Colleen in our back pocket, to be able to reach out and say, hey, we have a question, or we have a need. We have used her services extensively and highly recommend reaching out to Colleen. She made me feel comfortable asking questions that, sometimes it's a little bit nerve-wracking to know, am I asking this the right way? Should I even be asking this? And she immediately put us at rest. So I highly encourage recommending or reaching out to Colleen if you have similar sets of questions. It's exciting to have her expertise to start us off today. So I'll go ahead and introduce our goals for today's session. We have an action-packed session for you this afternoon. We're first going to get a little bit of a lesson in labor and in some of the Washington state policy that helps to guide our organizations in how we're providing resources and time management and tools for staff, and making sure that we're all compliant. So we'll get a little bit of that backstory first. And then I can't wait to share this tech tool that we've been using just a couple months now. We are loving it. I want to give you kind of a sneak preview of what we're using. There are others that might also work for you, but we'll tell you a little bit about Clockify, which is what NCW Tech is using as part of our tech stack, and a few use cases so that you get some ideas of the full utility of this tool. So with that, I will hand it to Colleen.
Thanks, Sue. So I have a lot of information on this first slide. I promise only 2 slides. We won't go too deep into wage and hour laws today, but really to understand those wage and hour laws that impact Washington state employers, we need to start with the federal law and then move to the Washington state laws. So at the top of the screen here, I'm starting with the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the acronym of FLSA. And the FLSA, it was established in 1938, so it's not new by any means. But the conversation about it is always changing. And the FLSA sets the national standards for minimum wage. The national level right now in 2025 is at $7.25 an hour. It also establishes overtime pay, record keeping, and youth employment standards. So while these federal rules and regulations, they establish a baseline, individual states can introduce additional standards, on the caveat that the state laws are in more favor to employees. They can't be lower than the baseline for the federal laws. So only if it favors the employee more can states enact those laws. When we talk about the FLSA, that's the base standard of how pay is set. You can exempt positions from the FLSA, sometimes called salaried positions. And from those, there's 3 different tests that you have to pass to safely exempt a position from the FLSA pay rules. One of those tests is job duties. The second, paid a salary or a fee. So it's a set amount prior to the work being performed. And then the pay is over the salary threshold. We'll get more into that as we move to the state. But all 3 of these tests have to be met in order to classify a position as exempt from hourly pay. If you fail one of them, it fails the entire ability to reclassify that position from hourly to salaried or some other pay structure that's exempt from the FLSA rules. As a reminder, those employees that are exempt, or those positions, I should more clearly say, those positions that are exempt from the FLSA don't generally qualify for overtime pay. Again, they're a set fee. They don't adjust based on the hour that they work. Exempt positions usually fall into one of the 5 different categories. There's executive, administrative, professional, outside sales, and computer professionals. As you can see on the screen, these are traditionally called white collar jobs, where they are more administrative, executive, managerial levels. Each of these 5 categories, they do have different duties tests. So it's not the same for each one of those categories, which can then start to become a little bit more technical of a discussion. And I want to come back to that administrative role. I added the clarification of management in there because traditionally we call administrative or clerical or other routine office jobs administrative, and that's not the meaning of this exemption. It has a different definition than what we commonly called administrative. So in the cases of the FLSA exemption tests, administrative is more managerial of different departments or functions of a business, and not those clerical or other routine office types of tasks. And let's go ahead and advance. So now let's move from the federal rules recap and talk about how Washington State Minimum Wage and Hour Act has modified some of those federal rules. It's established here in Washington in 1959, and as you can see, it was significantly updated with Initiative 1433 in 2018, and we're seeing that the impacts of that initiative that was implemented shortly after 2018 now taking effect in Washington state. In addition to this act increasing Washington state's minimum wage, which in 2025 is $16.66 an hour, significantly higher than that $7.25. Washington state also has specified a separate salary threshold that influences that classification between hourly and salary. I've given a link for your future use to look up, but the excerpt is also shown on this screen, showing a scale of those salary thresholds as they adjust in the coming years. They've been adjusting the last 3 years, and we still have a few years as this scale that was part of the original initiative. Currently in 2025, small employers, which are on the left-hand side of the screen, versus large employers, they have a smaller step up in threshold this year than a large employer does. But biannually, every other year, both small and large employers have the same threshold, and you can see that in this scale. Next year in 2026, both small and large employers will have a minimum threshold of $79,934.40. And I giggle a little bit at that because it does adjust annually based on factors, CPI, inflation, and whatnot. But it's very precise number that they come up with the calculation. The biggest part, though, is that this scale is when we get to, as we continue to climb, the January 1st, 2028 amount is all the way up to 93,000 plus. That's a high number, and it will change a little bit as we move on. That number's not fixed right now, as I mentioned earlier. But the results of these thresholds, they're going to continue to increase. It may mean you have an employee in a position that meets the duties test that would qualify as exemption, but they may not meet the salary threshold and therefore fail that ability to keep them or move them to an exempt status or classification in their pay, and be required to pay them in an hourly capacity and follow those FLSA rules for overtime and other requirements. And just as a reminder, that one failure for salary fails the entire test. I have a small notation on this screen that shows that computer professionals, they have a different salary threshold amount than what I'm showing on the screen. So if you have employees that are classified under that category of computer professional, it's important to note or go back and revisit those thresholds because they are different than the other 4 categories that are part of this scale. Also in Washington state, some of our industry professionals, they have specific requirements such as healthcare positions, retail, and there's some other specific exemptions in Washington state. So if these industry aspects are part of your nonprofit, make sure you're reviewing the applicability, because there could be some applicability even with a non-exempt, or excuse me, even with a nonprofit tax exemption status, your industry focus for that position, if you have a retail aspect or even a healthcare aspect, could could impact your classifications as well. Before I turn it over to Sue, I want to leave with some best practices. I have 3 of them that I want to share. Review annually the job descriptions and positions that you have classified as exempt or salaried, and ensure that the still current today assigned roles and responsibilities and compensation of the person filling that position meet the 3 tests and maintain that exemption class, that exemption classification. Also, keep documentation supporting that classification should it ever be challenged. As we know, there's a lot of effort from the Department of Labor, and so we want to make sure that when you are exempting someone from that basic core FLSA rule, that you have the documentation to support why that position met the duties test, as well as the compensation that you're considering as part of that exemption. And then the last best practice is for you to add into your future budget any positions that will need to be reclassified in the next 1 to 5 years. And you'll need to realign, and whether you'll need to realign tasks or leverage technology to help reduce overtime if that position no longer classified as exempt, and you have to reclassify them to hourly, and that's really where I see a lot of the pain points for reclassification is now the overtime factor, and how do we find that in our budgets. So if you're doing that forward projection, that helps with the discussion of what is going to need to be in the budget in order to cover that skill and that time requirement to do the roles and responsibilities of the position. Okay, so thank you for this quick recap on the FLSA and the wage and hour requirements. Now I'm going to pass it over to Sue.
Thanks, Colleen. As I said, Colleen is incredibly knowledgeable and such a resource. And I, as a nonprofit leader, as we were looking at this year ahead, we had some staff that were going to fall under that threshold that we now needed to try to provide some kind of a resource for tracking time. And we went looking for some technology tools. And so our goals for this technology tools is to be able to show you why we're tracking time and why it matters. It is a compliance issue, but it's beyond that, a really great nonprofit management tool. And I want to kind of give you an insight into that look and what we're using and how it could be useful to you. So as Colleen mentioned, we started with this time tracking because we were looking for a way to make sure that we had the documentation and that we were compliant with Washington law. In addition to the overtime, we found that we actually needed to be able to keep records and produce records if we were ever audited, up to 3 years of wage records to show that we were monitoring and paying overtime if overtime wages were due. And overtime right now, anything over 40 hours a week for any employees that are just about under $70,000 a year is something that we were going to have to try to figure out. How are we going to do this? And you want it to be done in a way that it's not going to take considerable time to track your time, because your time is an incredibly valuable resource to the mission that you're trying to accomplish. So we went looking for a tool. We are looking for a resource that will help us to be able to communicate with transparency to our funders. Here's where your dollars went. Here's how we used the staff time that we're billing you for. We wanted to be able to see where we were spending time on tasks that maybe don't have mission alignment, and or maybe we're not getting as much return on investment. There were a lot of time spent doing some kind of a task that didn't give us the results we wanted. We wanted to be able to look at employees and how we're using our employees, and we want to avoid burnout. We want to make sure that we have efficiencies in place. If this person and that person and a third person are all doing this task, is there something that we can do there? And so tracking your time gives you the data set that you have the ability to analyze and reorganize projects. And then volunteers can also be using time tracking. And while that's not necessarily a compliance thing for wages, it's really important for nonprofits because that is part of our requirements is to report how many people have invested volunteer hours, including your board members. So this tool that we've been using gives us all of these things, and we're just kind of starting to scratch the surface. But we have chosen a tool called Clockify to use. And I'll plug this and say this is not an official endorsement. We are using a free version of Clockify. It's great that they had a free version. It is super accessible. We found it to be kind of a neat, very intuitive platform for a variety of reasons, and I'll share with you those. But it's the free plan does a pretty good job. And then there are some features that you can add. It integrates with our calendars and with our project management software. We use Asana for NCW Tech Alliance, and there's an integration there, which is kind of nice. But as we talk through some of these, I want to make sure that you know this is not necessarily an endorsement. We haven't been funded by Clockify. There are other tools that will do these kinds of things, and I do encourage you to kind of explore around. More than anything, these technology versions can really help you get that data and that information into a more usable state, and hopefully we make that case today. Along with it was a very easy setup for us. This took about an hour to get us up and running in terms of the platform. We had to create a login with an email address, and then we invited our team with their email addresses. There is some back end introduction where you're assigning roles. Maybe this person's a project manager. We have two teams. We have some program managers that are direct support and overseeing the programs we provide. And then we have some core staff that are actually managing operations and communications and teams. And so I have assigned roles on the back end of Clockify that allow me to look at the time management differently for those two different roles. You might have others. We did the integration and linked up our calendars. And then the important part was we did some training for staff, and we're not quite done training staff. We've gone back a couple times to say, are we inputting this right? Do we have this categorized right? And it's a little bit of fine tuning. So this is a process that we're living in real time just since January. And then we had all of our staff download the extension. What's nice about that Clockify tool, one of the nice things is they have a mobile phone kiosk that allows our staff to be able to clock in and designate which project they're working on. And they have a web browser extension that as you're working on multiple things, you can quickly switch between projects that you're working on. So we've really liked this. I'm going to show you a video so you get a sense of what this interface looks like, but because there is human resource data in the NCW Tech Alliance version, I'm not going to show you ours as much as I would like to. I feel like that's a place where we want to be able to respect the privacy of our own employees. But if you want some candid conversation about it, I'm happy to be able to give you thoughts and opinions without and I will show you an overview where we've smudged out some of the identifiable information of the reporting that we get out here in a second. But we're using the Clockify demo videos. Just want to give you a peek at what this looks like. So the first video that I have, the video clip, is just showing you a way that you can organize projects inside this time management dashboard. Mostly what I want you to see out of this is it's not challenging as far as behind the scenes. It's very intuitive. So we'll take a peek here.
On the projects page, you can create projects to categorize time, sort projects by status, and archive the ones you no longer need. When you open a project in the Task tab, you can add tasks so people can categorize their activity. You can assign people to tasks so only assignees can track time on them. set hourly rate by task, and mark tasks no longer needs as done. In the Access tab, you can choose who can access the project and set more specific hourly rates. In the Status tab, you can compare estimated versus track time, see overall progress, and check if some task is over budget. In the Note tab, you can enter custom information like project documentation. And in the Settings tab, you can change project info like client and color, set project hourly rate, and add an estimate or budget. If you use custom fields, you can add them here, and time entries on this project will inherit them. On the team page, you can add.
I'm going to skip out. The video itself is like 20 minutes long, and you have the full link to the video, but I want to be able to, in this short window, show you just a couple of features of this. And so the dashboard that we use, and as you can see, it does take a little bit of time to be able to get your projects set up in there. And depending on the scope of work that your organization leads, you're going to want to put a little bit of time and thought into how you categorize the projects and assign the different folks to the different projects. So this is an administrative task that you do have to set some time aside for. But once you have things in, it's got some really great functions where you can clone projects or you can edit if you didn't get it quite right. So it's very forgiving. And then what you get back out is a dashboard. And the dashboard is going to show you the overall use of your organization's time resources towards that specific project. Now, with some of the paid version aspects, you can actually get billing and you can get some additional resource management integrated into this same platform. And those functions might be useful to you. We use a QuickBooks, and so the hourly component of it integrates really well with our QuickBooks for our billing, and we don't have direct service tiers, but that might apply to you. So I'll go ahead and show you the dashboard part, and you'll see the free version does not have some of the utility that you're going to see in the dashboard, just in terms of the types of billing structures that you can put in, but it is a very reasonable monthly rate if that's a function that might be useful to you.
So the dashboard shows you a visual breakdown of your track time at a glance. If you select team, you'll see your whole team's time broken down by project, plus see what each person is currently working on. For more options, there are reports. The summary report shows you all time broken down by week, month, or any custom period you need. The bar chart shows track time for each day, and below is a table with custom breakdowns. It shows the total time and money you've earned broken down by project. It can also show internal costs and profit, plus time estimates and budgets if they're set. You can break down data any way you wish, like by user, and then break it down further, like by client, and then date, and so on. You can use filters to see data just for a particular user or a client. You can download the report in PDF, CSV, and Excel, customize how it looks like, or create a link to it which you can send to others.
And again, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip past this last video, but I do have a video in here that shows the way that the projects themselves can be set up for billing, and that you can download the report with some of the integrations. We're going to skip past that one just so that we have some time for Q&A. And I want to tell you a little bit about some of the use cases. I will show you, this is one of the actual Clockify weekly reports for one of my employees, just so you have an idea of kind of what comes back out. And when I get this report, I'm able to see, this is a 1 week, the total number of hours that are worked. And that's important because if that person had over 40 hours a week, then I'm responsible for submitting that for overtime payment. And we would process that with payroll. but it's also very visual, and it's giving me an overview of which projects are in play, and I can look across all of my employees. I can pull those things together. I can look at the different categories of employees. And so there's a lot of information that I can gather from this data. So that's where I want to go with this conversation for the last couple minutes as we enter this last third. I do, before I get there, want to give you just some tips, a nonprofit leader to nonprofit leader. And that is with any technology adoption, and this is a technology adoption, be sure that you communicate with your team and your board and your organization why you're doing this. And it's not necessarily about being the person who's overviewing and speculating about the efficiency of their work or their time. This is really about making sure that you get proper visibility for the hours that you're putting in. This isn't a conversation about performance. This is a conversation about really understanding how things go, and be really thoughtful about communicating what level of detail is helpful to you as you're thinking about it for that purpose. They're going to need some time to be able to adjust and learn how to put things in, and you're going to need to invest some time in training. The more conversations you have up front, the better this is going to go. Try to make it easy. We like this tool because of the mobile integration and the web integration. But that initial setup is awkward. So try to make it easy and give some time for some questions, check in, schedule a check-in, see how it's going for folks. Lead by example. If you can use it, you may not need the overtime eligibility, but if you can use it, you're also going to experience some of those clunky parts, and you're going to be able to relate to the folks who are trying to adopt this technology in that way. You're also going to be able to show that it's about insights, not just hourly pay. I really want to know how I'm using my time. I'm doing it too. Set some time to review it. If you collect data that just goes and sits there, everybody kind of realizes that it just goes and sits there and it becomes less valuable data. So set some time aside for yourself to go in and take a peek, be curious about what you're going to see. And then celebrate. Celebrate is a different color here because I think we forget this part. But if you saved 5 hours on prep for an event and you can clearly see that in the data, take a minute and celebrate with your staff the efficiencies that you're getting and their investment in that time data. So don't forget to celebrate. I want to give you just 4 use cases where this is where our heads are at. This technology tool is allowing us to do better record keeping. So we're feeling really good about that compliance piece. We feel like if we were asked or audited, we'd be able to pull 3 years of records and be able to produce what we need to produce legally. We're also able to make sure that we don't have any penalties for not having done the overtime or the record keeping that we're supposed to be doing. The second use case is actually kind of neat. It's grant management, and we're able to track funded hours and funded activities. One of my favorite features about the tool that we're using is you can tag with a specific grant so that when I run a report for that tag, our funder, we can actually see that the director of operations did some hours on that, and my director of marketing did some hours on that project, and our STEM programs manager did some hours on that project. So you can tag it and pull through, and with one click, I can show our grant funder that the whole team was behind this project that we're doing for them. On use case number 3, we actually can use this to track volunteer time, including our board. This data is really important for our taxes, but it's also something that we report in our annual report. And for those that are smaller nonprofits that use a lot of volunteers, you can add and they can log their hours on project, and you can really see the extent of the time that folks are investing in your effort. So it's really great to be able to have something that is a technology tool that doesn't cost anything and it doesn't add anything, and you can actually have a record of those volunteer hours. And the last is just being able to have the ability to identify inefficiencies and opportunities for improvement. Right now, we know we're headed into a season where everybody's going to do a little bit more with a little bit less. And the way that we manage our time is going to be more important than ever. So being able to go in real time with data and understand what activities are attached to the funding that's coming in? What activities are we doing that are maybe not as much impact as they are for what we put into them? You know, really aligning that to our mission. And this technology tool can help you to be able to pull that data, slice it in a way that it's digestible, and put that to use. So your last slide here is what we're gaining from this technology adoption. It is a little bit of an investment. We feel like we're getting a lot more confident in the way that we're using our time, in the way that we're recognizing how staff are using their time, what tasks they've been assigned, where we've got some areas we need to be able to reinforce. That's going to give us a better idea of our budget, and that will give us more confidence. It will also give us a little bit better productivity and mission alignment. And the last is, you know, we're able to tell our story a little bit better, which is everything for nonprofits. So hopefully this is helpful to you. I think we've got an opportunity to answer some questions. Do we still have some time here? A couple minutes?
Yeah, we do.
I see one question in that's come in already that asks, are we using it for salaried employees also? And actually we are. We're finding so much help in understanding how we're using our time. And then to the point about being able to track for a funder, for a grant, if some of our salaried employees are spending their time on that project, we want to be able to say, here's where that investment went. So everybody's using it. And some folks that are really nerdy about time are actually really loving it, even the salaried ones, to be able to visually see that breakdown and making sure that we're getting all of our projects moved along. I think this question's for you, Colleen. There's a question that says, how do contractors fit into the laws and tools that you discussed?
Yes. I was just contemplating that a little bit. So contractors are not employees. And so that's generally through an arrangement like a vendor, and those fees and whatnot are separate from your payroll, right? So and I will say in recent years, the rules about what I should say the test for who is a contractor versus an employee. In March of 2024, we saw those tests become more stringent for what would be considered a contractor relationship versus an employee relationship. The risk of having a contractor versus an employee is that then you're not withholding the payroll taxes and remitting those for positions or for roles that are really should be classified as an employee based on those tests, as well as not eligible for benefits and that. It's a bit of a digression from this question. And so when we're talking about tracking time, that doesn't apply to a contractor status. More so it's then on a deliverable basis. And so I don't know if you would use that in this specific space. We will see with the current presidential administration as to whether they roll back some of those rules, and whether there's less regulations on that qualification of what's a contractor versus employee. So it could be plausible in the future that a contractor is doing functions that are pertinent to the organization, and then you would maybe want to consider this type of tool for tracking their deliverables. That's just all very hypothetical and getting into the weeds a bit, but generally you would not track their time. That's separate outside of an employer relationship.
I will say there's some contracted services, like maybe a part-time bookkeeper type of thing, where if it is helpful to you to be able to know when they worked or how they worked. For us, I do think on the free version, our platform will allow you to add an email, and then they can record hours that they worked for your organization. If that contractor does not have their own, right? They would normally invoice you, but if it's helpful to you in overseeing the calendars and these sorts of things, you can also put in hours. You can add them, and we didn't look at that, but it's very easy to manually adjust and upload hours. I didn't mention that, but some of our staff is really loving the like real-time clocking, and then other staff likes to go in at the end of the week and here's what I did. And that's an okay thing in this platform. They have the flexibility to go in and edit. It's a setting that you can, toggle on and off. So I could see a scenario too, where if you were really trying to track resources and you wanted to use it, you could put in your contractors' hours as a way to monitor that from the software side of things, but not necessarily legally required to keep that record.
Wait. And then I think this third question, you touched on it a little bit, Sue. It's asking if how do you do it when you're doing multiple things at one time? How do you keep that aligned?
Yeah, I'm smiling at this because Sarah's on this call and she's fantastic at multitasking. She's almost always got like 5 things happening at the same time. I'm outing her for this.
Yes, no, Alois, I can completely relate to you, and I'm not sure if it's my best practice as well, but I do end up doing about 5 things at one time. What the nice thing with Clockify though is, and sometimes I get caught up, right? Days get busy, we get distracted, somebody calls, we've got to jump in and help another staff member with something. What I really love about Clockify that Sue mentioned is you can jump in later on at the end of the day and back time everything. So I just try to make an estimate, particularly if it's for, a specific grant, or if it's just general operations, or it's a catch up that I've had, to estimate the amount of time that I had spent on specific projects, just so we get more detailed reporting that comes out of that. But oftentimes it might be that I'm saying general operations, like I'm working on multiple tasks at one time for an hour and a half. So what's really nice is that you can jump back in. There are also days that I completely forget, and I'll come in on a Tuesday and I haven't clocked Monday, and I can kind of go back and look through my calendar and populate that as well. So it's a really great tool for that.
Yeah. Well, I think that might be all the time that we have for questions. I do want to make sure you have the NCW Tech Alliance contact information if you have other questions for us. And then I'm going to put Colleen's up as well. If you have questions, reach out.
And I just want to say a huge thank you for everyone that joined us today, and a really big thank you to Sue and Colleen for taking the time to put this presentation together and to share your knowledge with us. It's super, super helpful, and we're really grateful. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'll send this presentation out along with Sue and Colleen's contact information too, if you have any additional questions. But I want to thank you both for today. That was really, really great.